taking meaningful steps to combat the worst effects of climate change and ideally arrest the conditions that cause it. This isn't optional. The entire world has a critical stake in undertaking climate change actions that have the potential to influence the kind of world we live in, our health, and the strength of economies and ecosystems that support life as we know it. It's the undeniable impacts of climate change that united countries of the world to tackle the causes of climate change and find ways to adapt to their worst effects. The Paris Agreement of 2015 embodies the global challenge to hold global temperature increases to 2 degrees, preferably 1.5 degrees, and establish ways to adapt to a warmer world. It's worth taking a look at why climate change action is so important to the future of the world we live in. We're already seeing ominous signs of climate change and its impacts on our lives. Climate change is defined as a change in average conditions such as temperature and rainfall in a particular region over a long period. Global climate change refers to the average long-term changes across the entire planet. Of course, Earth's climate has always been changing. However, scientists have observed unusual trends that go beyond the normal natural processes. According to NASA studies, Earth's average temperature has been increasing more rapidly than expected over the past 150 years. But it helps to understand what's behind these changes that have worldwide repercussions. There are several factors influencing climate change, but scientists agree that the shifts being observed, increasingly warmer conditions in the past 50 to 100 years, are anthropogenic in nature or man-made. Greenhouse gases, which are exacerbated by the burning of fossil fuels to power our vehicles, industries and homes, are warming up the planet to dangerous levels. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, while our contribution to global output of greenhouse gases that cause climate change is less than 1%, we too have a stake in ensuring that the world actively reduces emissions that lead to the worst impacts, such as weather volatility like flooding and drought and food insecurity, to name a few. In Trinidad and Tobago, an assessment of the sectors vulnerable to climate change done in 2019 shows the scale of climate change impacts. Agriculture would suffer from reduced rainfall, saltwater intrusion and more pests. Coastal communities and industrial ports would be at risk because of sea level rise caused by melting polar ice caps. Even tourism could be severely affected as beach erosion and the loss of biodiversity in our forests and reefs undermines the appeal of our tourist destinations. Fortunately, there are many climate change actions already underway in TNT, including through the NDC Implementation Plan. First, we ratified the Paris Agreement in 2018. We've committed to a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from our 3 main emitting sectors, power generation, transport and industry, by 2030. Our second is reducing emissions by 30% in public transportation, also by 2030. Under the Paris Agreement, we're obligated to track our progress in meeting these targets. TNT must also report on that progress to the United Nations. Several stakeholders are involved in gathering all of that data, from the Ministry of Planning and Development to the Environmental Management Authority and the emitters themselves, whether they're energy companies, manufacturers or public entities. In Trinidad and Tobago, most of our greenhouse gas emissions are produced by the energy sector. Under the NDC Implementation Plan, the energy sector is expected to reduce venting and flaring, essentially burning off excess fossil fuels, to achieve a 15% cut. They'll also have to embrace more energy-efficient technologies. Power generation is expected to continue to move to more energy-efficient combined cycle power plants, eventually to renewables like wind and solar. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago has already begun the shift towards renewable energies with the installation of utility-scale power generation of 112 megawatts of power. In the transport sector, the CNG conversion rollout will continue. But while CNG reduces carbon emissions, it won't get us any closer to the ideal of zero carbon, where we don't produce any global warming gases. But it's a step on the way to weaning ourselves off fossil fuel burning vehicles. Climate experts from the Ministry of Planning and Development foresee the development of an e-mobility policy meant to actively promote the use of electric vehicles, putting our decarbonization strategies into high gear. Climate change actions aren't just about big-ticket gestures we can see and touch. They also have to be baked into policies that will shape the future development of our society. A sprawling document, the Vulnerability and Capacity Assessment Report, details what can be done. For agriculture, for example, adaptation measures include installing water-saving irrigation and on-farm water storage facilities. Recommendations for protecting against the ravages of climate change include the building of seawalls to keep rising seas at bay. Also proposed is the stricter enforcement of building codes that take into account rising sea levels and flooding from torrential showers that are projected to become more frequent. One of the features of the Paris Agreement that TNT has ratified is the suggestion that carbon emissions come at a cost. For example, if a business or government was made to pay a tax for their emissions based on the already well-established polluter pay principle, it would motivate them to emit less greenhouse gas and incentivize others to find ways to offset those emissions. This is known as a carbon pricing mechanism. TNT is now exploring the feasibility of a carbon pricing mechanism as well as the potential for participation in carbon markets where carbon credits are bought and sold, thereby raising further funding to finance climate action. Of course, we can't discuss climate change actions without examining the energy sector, which is the major contributor to economic growth in Trinidad and Tobago. As we transition to a greener economy, where will all those energy sector workers go? But more than that, where would the future workers come from? It's a big question that planners want to answer with a just transition policy that addresses the types of skills we'll need in a green economy. There are significant opportunities that lie in the creation of green jobs, which are projected to increase in demand as we adopt new low-carbon technologies and lessen our reliance on fossil fuels. So another key policy in development is a plan to retrain and retool the labor force for participation in a cleaner, greener economy, as well as provide the training for the required skills to develop future generations. Many of these climate change actions will seem remote from your everyday life, but there is also a role for you in TNT's climate change plan. Every one of us can support the goal of a 15% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. You can be more conscious of the electricity you consume. TNTech has already distributed energy-efficient LED light bulbs to some consumers. You can choose to buy energy-efficient appliances. If you're a vehicle owner, you might switch to CNG or consider the purchase of an electric vehicle. Your choices matter. Every citizen has a role to play in the climate actions Trinidad and Tobago must take to secure our future. They all add up to the national goal of achieving a low-carbon horizon and adapting to the world's changing climate.